Hi, I'm Randy MacLean, the president of WayPoint Analytics, and I have Shelley Rowe with us in the studio today. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have Shelley with us today because she is a very important person for a lot of companies in some of the soft skills that are required for sophisticated management. And she and I have had some discussions in the studio this morning talking about the kinds of things that she's doing right now. And it was actually an epiphany for me to learn about some of the things that companies are doing to take their management and their success and their mechanisms for driving growth and profits to the next level. Shelley has a background at the Department of Transport in the government when she was there, and has been consulting on some of the things that were her specialties with the government before. And what her real expertise is in the neuroscience of how management is done. And getting a sense of some of these soft skills and some of these soft practices that really help the Fortune 100 do things at a higher level of efficiency and productivity than we typically do out in the distribution space was a real eye-opener for me today. So Shelley, one of the things that we talked about was in terms of what companies are doing to make themselves more successful. And one of the things that I learned, if I can just sort of make a framework for it, is that efficiency is really, really important right now. Right. And we used to talk about efficiency back in the 80s, and then we did ISO 9000 and quality, and it all got forgotten. But really what efficiency is defined as is getting the most out for what you put in. And so you're making expenditures in your company all the time. You're investing in all kinds of things to increase the efficiency of the operation so you can do more with less. Right. And companies have made substantive investments over the last couple of decades to bring themselves up to the level of Amazon, or starting to think about what it's going to be Amazon and so on. And it occurred to me through the things that you were saying was that, one of the biggest expenditures that companies make ongoing is payroll.
That's right.
And so I've always thought, well, you got to pay people to get things done, but in reality, you make an investment in a warehouse building, and after a while you say, I'm not getting enough out of the warehouse building for what I'm spending, so how do we upgrade it in terms of automation and so on so that it becomes more efficient and more productive? Now, the biggest place that we're making investment all the time is in our payroll. And then the question is, what am I doing to make sure I'm getting the right return on that?
Exactly.
So what kinds of things are you doing for companies that help them guarantee a better return on that payroll investment?
I think one of the first things, Randy, and you pointed this out, it's very easy to think about optimizing systems and things, but we don't always think about that big investment we're making in people every day, every month, every year, and yet we're losing a surprising amount of efficiency in those personnel interactions, where you've got that person who they dominate a meeting, and then you can't get the value from the person who shuts up and doesn't say anything because they don't want to engage and get into that conflict. You just lost value in your staff, and you lost efficiency.
Yeah, and that actually makes me think of something that I discovered years ago. I remember seeing this company that was run by this guy. And I was talking about his company, and he'd started off the business, and by about 4 or 5 years in, he got it up to about $750,000 in a year. And then for 30 years after that, it never passed $750,000. But I also noticed when I visited him that he ran around and made every decision that there was in the company. He went everywhere. If something spilled, he was the guy that decided who was going to mop it up and how. And because of that, because he could only make $750,000 of decisions, that's as big as the company got, which is so much different than Microsoft, where you have a $40 billion organization that has 4 guys, each of which can make $10 billion, which each have 4 guys that can make $2.5 billion, and so on, all the way down the organization. And I realized that these companies basically gain their marketplace and were able to survive by hiring the right talent and then giving them the ability to make decisions. And decision making was part of it, but the other thing is the information flow from the bottom. What should we do next? What are the problems? How can we solve them? Because as an executive, you're frequently lonely. Everybody's looking to you for the answer to every problem, and it's hard to always have the answer to every problem. And yet you're making a big investment in payroll to pay people that are supposed to know these things to help you have the right information, and in some cases to make the decisions for you. So the epiphany I had, or one of the things that I discovered when I was speaking to you, is what are the management techniques that are used to create a culture where you're getting full value for all that payroll investment, and everybody, whatever their area of expertise, is providing information back upward in the organization. And how is it that people are then able to act on a broad range of information for the best decision earlier on in the decision-making process? And the realization of how important that is to a company being the leader in its market, or being able to perform at a level higher than anyone else, suddenly became clear. So it was very interesting to hear about that from you.
And I'm working, Randy, with a company here in the area, and in fact, that's why I'm here in town. We've been working together for 2.5 years now, and they have seen record profit every single year that we've been working together. Mm-hmm. Now, while it's not necessarily due to the work that we specifically have been doing, that's been a big contributor, because what we've been able to do with them is to smooth out the friction points between the staff that create inefficiencies for the operation.
In that information flow.
In that information flow. And in the decision-making process, as you point out, those staff have been hired because of their expertise. They need to work together to collaborate, to combine their expertise to make the appropriate decisions for that company in a rapidly changing technology field. Mm-hmm. They can't do that if they're getting on each other's nerves every day.
Well, yeah, exactly. And then, of course, there's a lot of techniques that people can use to sort of improve the information flow. But I also think that we have to recognize that advanced management is basically facilitates that kind of thing. That this is a very, very important capability for a company to have internally if it wants to lead. In fact, you can't lead without it.
That's exactly right. It is underinvested in my experience. And the other thing that I find that companies may make a mistake with is that they say, okay, that's great, I need to invest in that biggest resource that I have, which is my staff, mm-hmm. and to help develop those skills so that they can work better together. So we're going to do it one time, and it's going to be good. We'll check that box, and we'll be good.
Oh, no.
And the brain and human beings don't work that way. Of course, the marketing industry understands,
yes.
right? It takes multiple times to hear, to learn, to practice information and new behaviors to get it into the system. That's what's been so brilliant with this company that I'm working with here in town, is that we're now 2.5 years in. And 2.5 years in, now you hear the staff being able to talk to each other with new language. We are creating a new culture, and it's not that hard to do.
Does it take 2.5 years to get to the point where you get a return on this?
No, we begin, and if you talk to that CEO, he said right off the bat that they got value for their investment immediately, within the first couple of sessions. What I did for them, as an example, is we did about 3 in-person sessions in the course of a year. Then I did a webinar in between to remind them of what we had just learned. And then I did email in between that were just very short, simple reminders of the things that we had taught in the courses. When I surveyed them at the end of the year, they liked the in-person best, right? Because they were learning and they were experiencing. But those email reminders are what began to embed the new behavior in the company.
Yeah, so you get the 5 to 7 repetitions so somebody can assimilate something and it'll work. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I guess the takeaway from this, though, is that every executive, every company is making continually investments in upgrading their infrastructure, their processes, their procedures, and so on, so that they can improve their position in the marketplace, give better service to their customers, do a better job of targeting into the market, and bringing more economic return out of the market. And yet, the place where they invest the most frequently, it just boils down to, well, we're going to train people. And this is just not training. This is something much different.
That's right.
This is basically investing in a corporate culture that allows you to use all the brain power that you have in the organization to full advantage, so that you can make $1 billion worth of decisions every year instead of just 750,000.
And you said too, when we were talking, it's like an immersion. It's taking the staff and immersing them in this over time. And it's not a big expensive investment to do that, to protect and grow the big investment that you do have in staff and staff salaries. Here are some of the numbers. When I interviewed them after just 1 year of time together, they said they had 50% productivity gains in meetings, 15% efficiency gains overall. They got the best decision the first time in less time for complex decisions.
Wow.
It was amazing. One person, they brought in a new manager, a technical manager, and he now had a number of staff that worked for him. He told me that because of the use of this assessment tool that I use, it cut off years of learning for him, because now he knew how to best optimize the workflow and the decision-making power of that investment of his staff.
Well, that is fantastic. Well, this has been a real interesting session. I'm really glad that you came in to spend some time with us to give us some orientation and to point out one of the critical areas that every successful company needs to work in order to be at the top of the league. So I want to thank you for spending time with us today. I hope this has been enlightening for you. By all means, call Shelley up and ask her about what she does for companies like yours. And in the meantime, I hope that you'll give some thought to what's coming out of this and think more about that big critical investment you're making in staff and what it is that you're doing to make it more efficient and to give a better return. So thank you, Shelley.
Thank you, Randy.
And we'll see you in future videos.